The kitchen clock read 2:47 a.m. when I found the receipt that would change everything. My name's Colin Harrow, and I've been inspecting buildings in this godforsaken Maine mill town for 15 years. I know when foundations are cracked, when walls are about to collapse, and apparently, when marriages are built on lies. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Dana wasn't home again. Third time this week she'd claimed overtime at the office, which was rich considering she supervised insurance claims, not exactly the kind of job that keeps you burning the midnight oil unless someone's house burned down. And in our sleepy town of Millbrook, the most exciting claim we'd seen all year was Mrs. Henderson's flooded basement. I was nursing my second beer and scrolling through mindless television when I decided to check the mail Dana had dumped on the counter. Bills, junk, more bills, and then a hotel receipt that made me freeze. The Riverside Inn, 2 hours north in Bangor. Room 237, 2 nights, charged to Dana's credit card. Either my wife's in love with the hotel minibar, or she's screwing someone who appreciates thread counts higher than mine, I muttered to the empty kitchen. The front door clicked open just as I was studying the receipt for the third time. Dana walked in, looking polished even at this ungodly hour. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup fresh, not exactly the look of someone who'd been hunched over claim files until nearly 3 in the morning. "You're up late," she said, dropping her purse by the door. Her voice carried that carefully neutral tone she'd perfected over our 12 years of marriage. "So are you." I held up the receipt. Funny thing about the mail today. Dana's face went through a series of micro-expressions that would have been fascinating if they weren't so damning. Surprise, calculation, then that practiced smile she used on difficult clients. "Oh, that. Rita and I needed to get away for a girls' weekend. I meant to tell you, but you've been so busy with those new construction inspections downtown." Rita, her sister, the same Rita who'd posted Instagram photos from her own house just 2 days ago, showing off her new kitchen renovation. I'd seen them myself when Dana was scrolling through her phone at breakfast. "Rita, huh?" I kept my voice level. That's interesting, considering she was posting pictures from her kitchen renovation all weekend. The smile faltered for just a second. "Different weekend. You know how social media works, Colin. People post old photos all the time." I nodded slowly, folding the receipt and slipping it into my shirt pocket. "Sure they do." Dana headed for the stairs, pausing halfway up. "I'm exhausted. Long day tomorrow." I bet. After she disappeared upstairs, I sat in the dark kitchen, turning possibilities over in my mind, like I was examining a building's structural integrity. Every marriage has its weak points, but I'd thought ours was solid enough. We'd had our problems. What couple doesn't? But this felt different. This felt like discovering termites in the foundation after you'd already moved in. My phone buzzed. A text from Marty, my best friend, and the closest thing to a brother I'd ever had. "You awake? Saw Dana at the Iron Tap tonight around 11. Wasn't alone." The Iron Tap was our local bar, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business. If Dana had been there with someone, half the town would know by morning. I texted back, "Who was she with?" "That slick guy from her office. Trent something. They looked pretty cozy." Trent Wallace. I'd met him exactly once, at Dana's office Christmas party 2 years ago. 35, slicked back hair, the kind of guy who wore expensive watches and talked about his car like it was a religious experience. Dana had mentioned him in passing a few times, always in the context of work projects and office politics. My phone buzzed again. "Want to talk about it?" "Tomorrow," I typed back. "Need to think." But thinking was the last thing I wanted to do. Instead, I found myself walking to my workshop in the basement, where I kept my tools and equipment. Among them was a small digital voice recorder I used for work notes during inspections. It was tiny, high quality, and could record for hours on a single charge. I stared at it for a long time, weighing the ethics of what I was considering. In my line of work, you learn to gather evidence before making accusations. A building inspector who jumps to conclusions ends up with lawsuits and a ruined reputation. But this wasn't about buildings. This was about my life, my marriage, my future. And if Dana was lying about girls' weekends and working late, what else was she lying about? I pocketed the recorder and headed back upstairs. Dana's purse sat by the front door where she'd dropped it, a designer bag I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. It took me less than 30 seconds to slip the recorder into the interior pocket, nestled against her wallet, where she'd never notice it. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I wondered what I'd hear when I played back whatever that little device captured. Part of me hoped for innocence, for explanations that would make sense of hotel receipts and late-night bar visits. But a bigger part of me, the part that had learned to spot structural damage before it brought down entire buildings, already knew what I was going to find. Donna was asleep when I slipped into bed, or at least pretending to be. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathe, and realized I was terrified, not of what I might discover, but of what I might have to do about it. The next morning played out like a performance neither of us had rehearsed properly. Dana made coffee and toast, chattering about her day ahead while I grunted appropriate responses from behind the local newspaper. The Millbrook Gazette had run another article about the downtown revitalization project, new buildings going up, old ones being renovated, all of which meant more work for me. I might be late again tonight, Dana said, buttering her toast with surgical precision. We've got that big commercial claim from the warehouse fire last month. Ms. Kittredge wants a full report by Friday. Ms. Kittredge was Dana's boss, a sharp-edged woman in her 50s who ran the insurance office like a military operation. I'd met her a handful of times at company functions, and she'd never struck me as the type to accept excuses for late work. Sure, I said. I'll probably grab dinner at the Iron Tap with Marty anyway. Dana's hand paused for just a fraction of a second before resuming its butter-spreading motion. Sounds good. You two haven't caught up in a while. Actually, Marty and I had beer together every Wednesday like clockwork, and Dana knew it. But I let it slide. She kissed my cheek on her way out, the same perfunctory peck she'd been giving me for months. Have a good day, honey. You too. I waited until her car disappeared down Maple Street before allowing myself to feel the full weight of what I was doing. Spying on your wife wasn't exactly covered in any marriage manual I'd ever read, but then again, neither was lying about your whereabouts. Work provided a welcome distraction. I had 3 inspections scheduled, a new residential build on the south side, a renovation project downtown, and a follow-up on a commercial property that had failed its initial inspection, the kind of routine work that usually kept my mind occupied. But today, every conversation seemed to circle back to relationships and trust. The contractor on the residential job complained about his business partner skimming money. The downtown renovation crew was dealing with a subcontractor who'd been cutting corners on materials. Even the commercial property owner was there because his previous inspector had been taking bribes to pass faulty work. It's all about trust, said Jim Morrison, the commercial property owner, as we walked through his building. Once that's gone, you might as well tear the whole thing down and start over. I nodded, making notes about the electrical work that still needed fixing. Foundation problems are the worst. You can patch surface issues, but if the base is rotten, everything else falls apart eventually. Exactly. My ex-wife taught me that lesson the hard way. By the time I finished my last inspection, it was nearly 6 o'clock. I drove home through streets I'd known my entire adult life, past houses I'd inspected, buildings I'd condemned, and structures I'd helped bring up to code. Millbrook wasn't much to look at, a mill town that had lost its mill 20 years ago, but it was home. Dana's car wasn't in the driveway. Inside, I found a note on the kitchen counter, working late as expected. Leftovers in the fridge. Love you. Love you. 2 words that had once meant everything and now felt like items on a checklist. I heated up leftover meatloaf and sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. The smart thing would be to wait, to give the recorder more time to capture whatever it was going to capture. But patience had never been my strong suit, especially when it came to problems that needed solving. At 7:30, I texted Dana, "How's the report coming?" The response came back quickly. "Slow going. Might be here until 10 or 11. I stared at the message, then opened the tracking app we'd installed on each other's phones years ago for practical reasons. Finding each other in crowded places, knowing when someone was running late, that sort of thing. According to the GPS, Dana's phone was indeed at her office building downtown. But Marty's text from the night before nagged at me. The Iron Tap was only 3 blocks from Dana's office. Easy walking distance. I grabbed my jacket and drove downtown, parking across from the insurance building where Dana worked. Her car was in the lot, just as the GPS had indicated. The office lights were on in the 3rd-floor windows. Everything looked exactly as it should for someone working late. I was about to leave when I saw movement in the parking lot. A figure emerged from the building's side entrance, the one employees used for smoke breaks and quick errands. Even from a distance, I recognized the purposeful stride and blonde hair. Dana walked 3 blocks down Main Street and disappeared into the Iron Tap. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, engine running, heat blasting against the October chill. Part of me wanted to march into that bar and confront whatever I was going to find, but a bigger part, the part that had learned to document everything before making accusations, decided to wait. At 11:15, Dana emerged from the bar. She wasn't alone. Trent Wallace walked beside her, close enough that their shoulders bumped as they navigated the sidewalk. He was exactly as I remembered. Average height, expensive haircut, the kind of confident posture that came from never having worked a day of manual labor in his life. They stopped beside Dana's car. Even from across the street, I could see the body language, the way she leaned into him, how his hand rested on her lower back as they talked. It was intimate in a way that made my stomach clench. The conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes. Then Trent kissed her. Not a friendly peck on the cheek. Not a casual goodbye between co-workers. A real kiss, the kind that involved hands in hair and bodies pressed together. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, watching my wife of 12 years kiss another man in a public parking lot like I didn't exist. They separated, said something else I couldn't hear, and went to their respective cars. Dana drove home. Trent headed in the opposite direction. I waited until both cars were out of sight before starting my truck. The drive home took exactly 7 minutes. Dana beat me there by 3. When I walked through the front door, she was already in her pajamas, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, and papers spread around her. "Hey," she said without looking up. "How was dinner with Marty?" "Good. Productive night at the office?" "Finally getting somewhere with this report. Should have it wrapped up tomorrow." I nodded, hanging my jacket on the back of a chair. "That's great. You looked pretty focused when I drove by earlier." Her fingers paused over the laptop keyboard. "You drove by?" "Went to Murphy's Hardware for some supplies. Saw your car in the lot." "Oh," she resumed typing. "Yeah, I've been chained to this desk all evening." I poured myself a glass of water, studying her profile. Dana had always been beautiful, the kind of woman who turned heads in restaurants and made other men wonder how a guy like me had gotten so lucky. But looking at her now, I saw something I'd been missing, the careful calculation behind every word, every gesture. "Well, I'm beat," I said, going to head up to bed. "I'll be up in a few minutes. Just want to finish this section." "Take your time." Upstairs, I lay in bed listening to the sound of typing from the kitchen, mixed with the occasional ping of text messages. At some point, the typing stopped, but the text alerts continued. Dana didn't come to bed until after midnight. The next morning followed the same script as the day before, with one crucial difference. When Dana kissed my cheek goodbye, I slipped the voice recorder out of her purse. I waited until her car disappeared before pressing play. The first few minutes of the recording were mundane office sounds, typing, phone calls, the general hum of workplace activity. I fast-forwarded through most of it, stopping when I heard Dana's voice in what sounded like a private conversation. Can't keep doing this much longer. Colin's starting to ask questions. A male voice responded, one I recognized as Trent's. What kind of questions? About the hotel receipt, about working late. He's not stupid, Trent. He inspects buildings for a living. He knows how to spot problems. My hands clenched around the recorder. Here it was, confirmation of what I'd seen but hadn't wanted to believe. So, what do you want to do? Trent asked. I don't know. Maybe we should cool things off for a while. Cool things off? Trent's voice sharpened. Dana, we've been planning this for months. The transfer goes through next week, and then we're both out of here. You said you were ready to leave him. Transfer? I rewound and played that section again. What transfer? I am ready, Dana said. I just need to be smart about it. If Colin gets suspicious and starts digging around, he might find out about the other stuff. What other stuff? There was a long pause, then Dana's voice, lower now. The claims I've been adjusting. The ones where we've been creative with the payouts. Dana was talking about insurance fraud, using her position to manipulate claims and pocket the difference. It was the kind of crime that could land her in federal prison. How creative? Trent asked. Creative enough to fund our new life in Florida, but also creative enough to put me away for 10 years if anyone looks too closely at the paperwork. The conversation continued, but I'd heard enough. I stopped the recording and sat in my kitchen, staring at the device like it was a venomous snake. My wife wasn't just cheating on me, she was stealing from her employer, planning to leave town, and apparently taking her lover with her. The woman I'd shared a bed with for 12 years was a criminal. I played the rest of the recording, capturing more details about their plan. They'd been skimming money from large commercial claims for 8 months. The transfer Trent had mentioned was a job offer he'd received in Tampa, a convenient excuse to leave Maine together. Dana planned to file for divorce after they were settled in Florida, claiming irreconcilable differences. What about Colin? Trent asked at one point. Won't he fight the divorce? Colin's a good man, Dana said, and the casual way she dismissed me made my chest tight. He'll be hurt, but he won't make it difficult. He's not the vindictive type. Not the vindictive type. We'd see about that. I spent the next 2 hours making copies of the recording and researching insurance fraud penalties in Maine. Then I called in sick to work and drove to the courthouse, where I filed for divorce and requested an emergency restraining order to freeze our joint assets. By noon, I was sitting in the office of Detective Ray Morrison, no relation to the property owner I'd met the day before, laying out everything I'd discovered. This is a serious accusation, Mr. Harrow, Detective Morrison said, reviewing the documents I'd brought. Insurance fraud at this level is a federal crime. I know. That's why I'm here. And you're certain about the authenticity of this recording? I nodded. I made it myself. Dana doesn't know it exists. Morrison studied me across his desk. He was a thin man in his 50s, with the kind of patient demeanor that probably served him well in interrogations. What do you want to happen here? I want justice, and I want to make sure she doesn't skip town before you can arrest her. We'll need to investigate before we can make any arrests. That could take weeks. Then I guess I'd better make sure she stays put. I left the police station with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Dana thought she knew me, thought she could predict my reactions. She was about to learn how wrong she was. My first stop was Dana's office. I'd never visited her workplace unannounced, but today seemed like a good day to start new traditions. The insurance office occupied the 3rd floor of a renovated brick building downtown. I'd actually inspected the renovation work 3 years ago, back when Dana and I still talked about everything. She'd been excited about the new space, the modern cubicles, the view of Main Street from her desk. The receptionist, a young woman named Kelly, greeted me with surprise. "Mr. Harrow, Dana didn't mention you were coming by." "Surprise visit," I said. "Is she in?" "She's in a meeting with Ms. Kittredge, but it should be wrapping up soon. You can wait in her cubicle if you'd like." Dana's workspace was exactly what I'd expected, meticulously organized, with framed photos of us from happier times and a small plant she'd somehow managed to keep alive. Her computer was locked, but her desk drawers weren't. I wasn't looking for evidence, I already had that. I was looking for something more personal, something that would help me understand how the woman I'd married had turned into someone I didn't recognize. I found it in the bottom drawer, a manila folder labeled FL Opportunities. Inside were printouts of job listings in Tampa, apartment rental listings, and a handwritten note in Dana's careful script. New life checklist. 1. Finalize transfer requests. 2. Liquidate joint accounts. 3. File divorce papers after move. 4. Block Colin's number. Block Colin's number. 12 years of marriage, and I was going to be dismissed with the digital equivalent of changing the locks. "Colin?" I turned to find Dana standing behind me, her face pale. Ms. Kittredge stood beside her, a sharp-featured woman who looked like she could cut glass with her stare. "What are you doing here?" Dana asked. I held up the folder. "Reading about Florida. Sounds nice this time of year." Dana's eyes went wide. Ms. Kittredge looked between us with the expression of someone who'd walked into a domestic dispute and wanted no part of it. "Perhaps I should give you two some privacy," Ms. Kittredge said. "Actually," I said, standing up, "you might want to stay. This concerns you, too." I pulled out my phone and played a section of the recording, the part where Dana discussed creative claim adjustments. The color drained from both women's faces. "Dana," Miss Kittredge said slowly, "what is he talking about?" Dana looked trapped, her eyes darting between me and her boss. "I can explain." "No need," I said. "The police will want to hear the explanation. I filed a report this morning." The silence that followed was deafening. Other employees had started to notice the commotion, peering over cubicle walls and whispering among themselves. "You bastard," Dana whispered. "Actually," I said, pocketing my phone, "I think that title belongs to someone else." I walked out of the office, leaving Dana to face the consequences of her choices. Behind me, I could hear Ms. Kittredge's voice, sharp and angry, demanding explanations that Dana couldn't provide. The elevator ride down felt like the longest 3 floors of my life. When the doors opened on the ground floor, I stepped out into the October afternoon and took my first deep breath in 24 hours. My phone buzzed immediately. A text from Dana. "How could you do this to me?" I typed back, "How could you do this to us?" Her response came quickly. "We need to talk. Meet me at home." "Already on my way." The drive home took 7 minutes, just like always. But everything else had changed. Dana was waiting in the kitchen when I got home, pacing like a caged animal. She'd changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a sweater, but she still looked polished, controlled. It was a facade I was finally learning to see through. "Sit down," she said. "We need to discuss this rationally." "Rationally?" I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "You mean like how you rationally plan to steal money and run off with your boyfriend?" "It's not that simple." "Actually, it is. You've been cheating on me, stealing from your employer, and planning to abandon our marriage. Those are facts, Dana. There's nothing complicated about them." She stopped pacing and faced me directly. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The job, the money problems, feeling trapped in this hopeless town." "What money problems? We own our house outright. We both have good jobs. We're not rich, but we're comfortable." Comfortable, she repeated, like the word tasted bitter. Do you know what comfortable gets you, Colin? Nothing. A life of mediocrity in a town that's fading by inches. So you decided to commit felonies instead? I decided to take control of my life. Her voice was rising now, the careful composure cracking. I'm 37 years old, and what do I have to show for it? A marriage to a man who's given up on ambition, a job processing other people's disasters, a house on a street where nothing ever changes. You have a life, Dana. We have a life. Or we did, until you decided to throw it away. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. What life? When was the last time we talked about the future? When was the last time you suggested we travel somewhere, or move somewhere new, or do anything besides exist in this comfortable little bubble you've built? When was the last time you mentioned being unhappy? When was the last time you suggested we talk about any of this instead of sneaking around behind my back? Would you have listened? Really? Or would you have given me that patient, reasonable voice you use when you think I'm being emotional? I stared at her, recognizing something true in the accusation. How many times had I dismissed her complaints about work, about the town, about our routine? How many times had I assumed she was just having a bad day instead of trying to tell me she was drowning? That doesn't excuse what you did, I said finally. No, it doesn't, but it explains it. She sat down at the kitchen table, suddenly looking older than her 37 years. The fraud started small, a few $100s here and there from claims that were already inflated. Insurance companies expect a certain amount of padding, everyone knows that. A few $100s isn't what I heard on that recording. It grew. Trent showed me how to manipulate the system, how to create claims that looked legitimate but had built-in overages. We were careful, professional about it. Professional criminals. We were smart about it, she corrected. Until you started getting suspicious. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. After 12 years of marriage, we were finally having an honest conversation, and it was happening because I'd caught her committing crimes. Tell me about Trent. Dana's expression softened in a way that made my stomach clench. He's everything you're not. Ambitious, willing to take risks, excited about the future instead of resigned to it. He's also willing to help you steal money and abandon your husband. He loves me. He loves what you can steal for him. You think this is the first time he's run this scam? You think you're special or just convenient? For the first time since I'd walked in, Dana looked uncertain. It's not like that, isn't it? How long have you known him? 2 years. And how long after you met him did he start suggesting you could improve the claims process? Dana didn't answer, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. He targeted you, Dana, found an unhappy wife with access to insurance money and convinced her she deserved better. You're not his partner. You're his mark. You're wrong. Am I? When the police arrest him, and they will, do you think he's going to protect you? Or do you think he's going to claim you were the mastermind and he was just following orders? Dana stood up abruptly, knocking her chair backward. Stop it. Just stop. You don't know him. I know men like him. I've dealt with them my entire career. Contractors who cut corners, inspectors who take bribes, smooth talkers who promise easy money and leave other people holding the bag when it all falls apart. This is different. No, it's not. And deep down, you know it. My phone rang. Detective Morrison's number showed on the screen. Mr. Harrow, we've made an arrest. Trent Wallace is in custody. We'd like to speak with your wife as soon as possible. I looked at Donna, whose face had gone white. We'll be there within the hour. After I hung up, Dana sank back into her chair. They arrested him? Did you think they wouldn't? I thought we had more time. Time for what? To run? To destroy evidence? She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. I could see the truth in her expression. There's something else, I said. I filed for divorce this morning, and I froze our joint accounts. You what? I protected myself, Dana, the same way you should have protected us instead of destroying everything we built together. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. You can't do that. I already did. The papers are being served tomorrow. Colin, please. We can work through this. We can go to counseling, figure out what went wrong. What went wrong is that you decided to become a criminal. What went wrong is that you fell in love with someone else. What went wrong is that you planned to disappear from my life like I never mattered. You do matter. You did matter. Past tense. That's honest, at least. Dana started crying then, not the careful tears of manipulation, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone whose world was collapsing. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to hold her like I had through a dozen other crises over the years, but a bigger part of me, the part that had spent the last 24 hours discovering that my marriage was a lie, felt nothing but cold satisfaction. We should go, I said. The detective is waiting. I can't face this. You should have thought of that before you decided to steal money and cheat on your husband. I stood up and grabbed my keys. You can come with me, or you can wait for them to come get you. But either way, you're going to face what you've done. Dana wiped her eyes and looked at me with something approaching hatred. You're enjoying this, aren't you? You're actually enjoying watching me fall apart. You know what I'm enjoying? Finally seeing you tell the truth. She followed me to the truck without another word. The police station was a squat brick building that had been old when I was a kid. I'd never been inside before, despite living in Millbrook my entire adult life. It was the kind of place you hoped never to need. Detective Morrison met us in the lobby, a professional smile on his weathered face. Mrs. Harrow, thank you for coming in. We have some questions about your work at the insurance office. Dana nodded, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. I understand. Mr. Harrow, you're welcome to wait here, or you can come back later. This might take a while. I'll wait. I watched Dana disappear into the back of the building, flanked by Detective Morrison and a female officer I didn't recognize. Then I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair and tried to process what my life had become in less than 48 hours. My phone buzzed. A text from Marty. Heard there was some excitement at Dana's office today. You okay? I typed back. Long story. Meet me at the Iron Tap later. Already there. Take your time. The Iron Tap was exactly what you'd expect from a blue-collar bar in a fading mill town. Dim lighting, worn wooden floors, and the kind of regulars who'd been sitting on the same stools for 20 years. It was also the unofficial headquarters of Millbrook's gossip network. When I walked in 3 hours later, the conversation faded. Every head turned toward me, and I could feel the weight of their curiosity. Marty was sitting at his usual spot at the end of the bar, nursing a beer and watching the door. He was my age, but looked older, the kind of weathering that came from 20 years as a cop in Boston before moving back to his hometown to work security at the paper mill. Rough day? He asked as I slid onto the adjacent stool. You could say that. The bartender, a grizzled man named Pete who'd been serving drinks since before I was legal to drink them, set a beer in front of me without being asked. On the house, he said. Heard you've had some troubles. I looked around the bar, taking in the faces of men I'd known for years. Construction workers, mill employees, retirees, small business owners, the backbone of a town that had seen better days. They were all watching me with expressions ranging from sympathy to curiosity. News travels fast around here, I said. Faster than usual when it involves insurance fraud and adultery, said a voice from the corner. I turned to see Harold Vance, one of the town's 3 selectmen and the owner of the hardware store. He was sitting with 2 other men I recognized, Tom Bradley, who ran the auto repair shop, and Frank Morrison, Detective Morrison's older brother and the town's former fire chief. No offense, Colin, Harold continued, but your wife's been the talk of the town for months. People have been wondering when you'd figure it out. Months? Tom Bradley nodded. She and that city boy have been meeting here pretty regularly. Always sat in the back booth, always left separately, but it wasn't exactly subtle. Why didn't anyone tell me? The three men exchanged glances. Frank Morrison spoke up. What were we supposed to say? Hey, Colin, we think your wife is cheating on you? That's not exactly casual conversation. Besides, Harold added, we figured you knew. Thought maybe you had some kind of arrangement. An arrangement. The idea that people had been watching my marriage fall apart while assuming I was okay with it made my chest tight. Well, I said, raising my beer, now everyone knows I didn't have an arrangement. What's going to happen to her? Tom asked. That's up to the courts, but insurance fraud is a federal crime. She's looking at serious prison time. The bar fell quiet. Whatever people had expected from this conversation, it wasn't that level of consequence. Jesus, Harold muttered. Prison? She stole money, Harold. A lot of money. What did you think would happen? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Trent. We need to talk. I showed the message to Marty, who frowned. How did he get your number? Probably from Dana's phone. Another message appeared. Dana doesn't know I'm contacting you. There are things you need to know. I stared at the screen, then typed back, I know everything I need to know. You don't. Meet me tomorrow morning. Coffee shop on Main Street, 8 a.m. Why would I do that? Because Dana isn't the only one who's been lying to you. I showed the exchange to Marty, who shook his head. Don't do it, man. Whatever game he's playing, it's not worth it. What if he's telling the truth? What if he's trying to manipulate you the same way he manipulated Dana? Around us, the bar had resumed its normal volume, but I could feel people listening to our conversation. In a town like Millbrook, my business was everyone's business now. I need another beer, I said. Pete refilled my glass without comment. As he did, the front door opened and Rita walked in. Dana's sister was 2 years older and had never liked me much. The feeling was mutual. She'd always thought Dana had married beneath her station, and she'd never been shy about expressing that opinion. She spotted me immediately and walked over, her face flushed with anger. You snake, she said loudly enough for the entire bar to hear. How could you do this to her? Do what, exactly? Turn her into the police like she's some kind of criminal. She is some kind of criminal, Rita. She stole money. She made some mistakes. She committed felonies. There's a difference. Rita's voice rose another notch. She's your wife. You're supposed to protect her, not destroy her. I was her husband. She's the one who destroyed that. So you decided to ruin her life out of spite? I stood up, aware that every conversation in the bar had stopped. I decided to tell the truth. If that ruins her life, maybe she should have thought about that before she started lying. You self-righteous bastard. You think you're so perfect, sitting in your little house, doing your little job, never taking any risks or trying to better yourself. Dana deserved more than that. Dana deserved a husband who was faithful and honest. Apparently, that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough because you weren't enough. You never were. The words hit harder than I'd expected, probably because they echoed my own fears. But before I could respond, Marty stood up. That's enough, he said quietly. This doesn't concern you, Rita snapped. Colin's my friend. That makes it my concern. Your friend just destroyed my sister's life. Your sister destroyed her own life, said a voice from the corner. We all turned to see Harold Vance standing up, his face grim. I've known Colin for 15 years. He's a good man who deserved better than what Dana gave him. We all saw what was happening, Tom Bradley added. Dana made her choices. She made mistakes, Rita insisted. She made crimes, Frank Morrison corrected, and now she's going to pay for them. Rita looked around the bar, realizing that the room was not on her side. You're all pathetic. A bunch of small-town losers who can't stand to see someone try to escape this place. Your sister didn't try to escape, I said. She tried to steal her way out. There's a difference. Rita glared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out without another word. The bar remained quiet for several minutes after she left. Finally, Pete broke the silence. Another round? Make it a double, I said. As Pete poured, Harold Vance walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. For what it's worth, Colin, you did the right thing. Doesn't feel like it. The right thing usually doesn't, but that doesn't make it wrong. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Around me, the conversations gradually resumed, but I could feel the weight of sympathy and judgment in equal measure. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Trent. 8 a.m. tomorrow. Don't let Dana's lies be the only version you hear. I stared at the message for a long time, then made a decision that would change everything. I'll be there, I typed back. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dana's face in the police station, heard Rita's accusations, felt the weight of an entire town's expectations. By 7 a.m., I was already dressed and drinking coffee, staring out the kitchen window at a gray October morning that matched my mood. The coffee shop on Main Street was a recent addition to Millbrook's struggling downtown, the kind of place that served overpriced lattes to the few professionals who still worked in the area. I'd never been inside, but it seemed like neutral territory for whatever conversation Trent wanted to have. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with his back to the wall. Up close, he looked different than I remembered, older, more worn around the edges. Prison orange didn't suit him. They let you out? I asked, sliding into the opposite seat. Bail hearing this morning. My lawyer thinks the charges might not stick. Your lawyer's optimistic. Trent leaned forward, his expression serious. Colin, there are things about Dana you don't know. Things she never told you. Such as? The fraud wasn't my idea. It was hers. I stared at him. You're trying to blame this on her? I'm trying to tell you the truth. Dana approached me about manipulating claims 6 months after I started working there. She'd already been skimming money for over a year. That's not what I heard on the recording. What you heard was Dana trying to minimize her involvement. She's good at that, making other people think they're responsible for her decisions. I shook my head. You're lying. Am I? Think about it, Colin. How long has Dana been unhappy with your marriage? How long has she been complaining about money, about feeling trapped? That doesn't prove anything. It proves motive. Dana didn't fall into crime because I seduced her. She was already a criminal when I met her. I just gave her a better system. Trent pulled out his phone and scrolled through messages. Look at this. Text thread from 8 months ago. He showed me the screen. Messages from Dana. Found another way to increase the Morrison claim, can add $3,000 without raising flags. The warehouse fire payout can be inflated by at least $10,000. You worry too much. I've been doing this longer than you. I stared at the messages, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. These could be fake. They're not, and there are dozens more like them. Why are you showing me this? Because Dana's going to try to pin everything on me. She's going to claim I corrupted her, manipulated her, forced her into it. And you're going to believe her because you want to believe the woman you married isn't capable of this level of deception. I leaned back in my chair, processing what he was telling me. Even if this is true, you still helped her. Yes, I did. And I'm going to pay for that. But I'm not going to let her destroy my life to save hers. What do you want from me? I want you to know who you really married. Dana isn't a victim, Colin. She's a predator, and you weren't her first mark. What do you mean? Trent pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table. Her first husband. Dana's never been married before. That's what she told you. The truth is, she was married for 3 years in Vermont before she moved to Maine. Guy named Michael Torres worked for an insurance company in Burlington. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were copies of a marriage certificate, divorce papers, and several newspaper clippings. "Insurance supervisor charged with embezzlement," read one headline. "Local woman testifies against husband in fraud case," read another. "She did the same thing to him," Trent said quietly. "Convinced him to help her steal money, then testified against him when they got caught. He's still in prison." I read through the articles, my hands trembling. The pattern was identical. Unhappy marriage, financial complaints, gradual corruption of a spouse, ultimate betrayal. She never mentioned any of this? Would you have married her if she had? I stared at the papers, seeing my marriage in an entirely different light. Every complaint about money, every expression of dissatisfaction, every moment of distance between us, it had all been leading to this. "How did you find out?" "I got suspicious when she started pushing me to take bigger risks. Did some research, found the court records. That's when I realized I wasn't her partner. I was her next victim." "Then why didn't you stop?" Trent looked ashamed for the first time since I'd sat down. "Because I thought I was smarter than her first husband. I thought I could play the game without getting played. And now? Now I'm facing federal charges, and Dana's probably in some lawyer's office right now, figuring out how to make this all my fault." I closed the envelope and pushed it back across the table. "Keep it." "Colin, I don't need to see any more. I believe you." "What are you going to do?" I stood up, leaving money on the table for coffee I hadn't touched. "I'm going to make sure she doesn't do this to anyone else." The drive to the police station took 5 minutes. I spent them thinking about 12 years of marriage, wondering how many of Dana's words had been true, how many of her emotions had been real. Detective Morrison was at his desk when I arrived, looking like he'd been up all night. "Mr. Harrow, what can I do for you?" "I have some information about my wife's case. Information that changes everything." I spent the next 2 hours going through everything Trent had shown me, watching Detective Morrison's expression grow grimmer with each revelation. "This puts a different spin on things," he said finally. "If your wife has a history of this behavior, it affects how we prosecute the case." "What happens now?" "Now we investigate her background more thoroughly, and we have another conversation with Mrs. Harrow. I want to be there when you talk to her." "That's not how this works, Mr. Harrow. She's been lying to me for 12 years. I think I've earned the right to hear her tell the truth." Detective Morrison studied me for a long moment. "There's an observation room. You can watch through one-way glass, but you can't interfere." "Understood." Dana arrived an hour later with a lawyer I didn't recognize, a sharp-dressed woman from Portland who looked expensive. They were led into an interview room, while I settled into the observation room next door. Through the one-way glass, I watched my wife prepare to lie her way out of the consequences of her actions. She looked composed, confident, ready to play the victim one more time. But Detective Morrison had done his homework. "Mrs. Harrow," he began, "we've discovered some inconsistencies in your background, specifically regarding your previous marriage to Michael Torres." Dana's composure cracked for just a moment. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You were married to Mr. Torres from 2008 to 2011. He's currently serving a 7-year sentence for insurance fraud. Fraud that you helped orchestrate before testifying against him." Dana's lawyer leaned over and whispered something in her ear. Dana shook her head. "That's different. Michael forced me to help him. I was a victim in that situation." "Were you also a victim when you approached Trent Wallace about manipulating claims?" "Because we have text messages suggesting you initiated the fraud scheme." Detective Morrison laid out printouts of the messages Trent had shown me. Dana stared at them like they were written in a foreign language. "These are taken out of context," she said finally. "What context makes 'I've been doing this longer than you' sound innocent?" Dana's lawyer called for a recess. Through the glass, I watched my wife's carefully constructed facade finally collapse. She wasn't the victim of circumstance she'd always claimed to be. She was exactly what Trent had said, a predator who used marriage as a cover for criminal activity. When the interview resumed, Dana had changed tactics. Now she was claiming emotional distress, an abusive childhood, financial desperation, anything that might generate sympathy. But Detective Morrison wasn't buying it. "Mrs. Harrow, you've committed insurance fraud in 2 different states, destroyed 2 marriages, and sent at least 1 innocent man to prison. This isn't about desperation. This is about choice. I never meant for any of this to happen. You meant for all of it to happen. The only thing you didn't mean was to get caught." I left the police station feeling empty. Not relieved, not vindicated, just hollow. The woman I'd loved for 12 years had never existed. She'd been a character Dana played to gain access to my stability, my trust, my willingness to be used. My phone rang as I reached my truck. Rita's number. "You bastard," she said without preamble. "What did you tell them?" "I told them the truth." "You told them lies. Dana explained everything to me. You're trying to frame her because you can't accept that she fell in love with someone else." "Rita, Dana was married before. Did you know that?" Silence. "Did you know her first husband is in prison for fraud she helped commit?" "That's impossible." "Check the court records. Michael Torres, Burlington, Vermont. She destroyed his life the same way she tried to destroy mine." "You're lying." "I'm done lying for her. And I'm done listening to lies about her." I hung up and drove home through streets that looked different now, like I was seeing them clearly for the first time. Millbrook wasn't the hopeless town Dana had claimed it was. It was home. It was honest. It was everything she wasn't. That evening, I sat in my kitchen now since Dana wouldn't be coming home, and made a list of everything I needed to do. File insurance claims for the money she'd stolen from our accounts, change the locks, cancel joint credit cards, rebuild a life that had been built on lies. My phone buzzed. A text from Dana. "Please don't do this to me. I love you. We can work this out." I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. She'd had 12 years to love me. Instead, she'd spent that time planning my destruction. Now it was my turn to plan. The next few days passed in a blur of legal paperwork and uncomfortable conversations. Dana was denied bail after the prosecutor presented evidence of her previous conviction and flight risk. The story made the front page of the Millbrook Gazette, complete with a photo of Dana in handcuffs being led into the courthouse. I'd become a celebrity of sorts, the wronged husband who'd brought down a criminal conspiracy. People I barely knew stopped me on the street to offer support or ask questions. The attention was unwelcome, but I understood it. In a town where nothing much happened, this was the biggest story in years. 3 days after Dana's arrest, I was inspecting a renovation project downtown when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Colin Harrow?" "Yes." "This is Michael Torres." I nearly dropped the phone. Dana's first husband, calling from prison. "Mr. Torres, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I heard about what happened. Wanted to thank you for finally stopping her." "How did you get my number?" "My lawyer's been following the case. Dana's pattern is exactly the same as what she did to me. Thought you might want to know what to expect." I found a quiet corner of the construction site and sat down on a pile of lumber. "I'm listening." "She's going to try to make a deal, claim she was manipulated, abused, forced into it. She'll say whatever she thinks will get her the lightest sentence." "Will it work?" "Depends on the prosecutor. Mine believed her sob story. I got 7 years, she got probation, and a new identity." "New identity?" "Legal name change after the divorce. Dana Torres became Dana Mitchell, then Dana Harrow after she married you. She's probably got another identity ready if she ever gets out of this." I felt sick. "How many others have there been?" "I don't know, but I doubt we're the only ones. Dana's good at finding men who trust easily and have access to money. What happened to you? Michael's voice grew quiet. Lost everything. House, job, reputation. Spent 3 years in federal prison for crimes she planned. My family still won't talk to me. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be careful. Dana's dangerous when she's cornered, and right now she's got nothing left to lose. After he hung up, I sat in the construction site for a long time, thinking about patterns and predators and the woman I'd shared a bed with for 12 years. That evening, I drove to the Iron Tap, needing the comfort of familiar faces and honest conversation. The bar was crowded for a Thursday night, and I recognized most of the faces: construction workers, mill employees, small business owners, people who worked with their hands and said what they meant. Marty was at his usual spot, nursing a beer and watching the door. He nodded when I walked in. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected, worse than I'd like." Pete set a beer in front of me without being asked. "Heard Dana's lawyer is trying to work out a plea deal." "Where did you hear that?" "Rita was in here earlier, telling anyone who'd listen that Dana's going to expose corruption in the prosecutor's office." I shook my head. Even now she's trying to play the victim. "Some people never learn," said a voice behind me. I turned to see Harold Vance, the selectman and hardware store owner. He was with his usual group, Tom Bradley and Frank Morrison. "Mind if we join you?" Harold asked. "Got something we want to discuss." They pulled up chairs, and Harold leaned forward with the expression of a man about to share important news. "Town council met this afternoon. Voted unanimously to recommend you for the chief building inspector position." I stared at him. "Chief inspector? That's Jim Patterson's job. Jim's retiring early. Health problems. Position comes with a 20% raise and oversight of all municipal construction projects." "Why me?" Tom Bradley spoke up. "Because you're honest. Because you do your job without cutting corners or taking shortcuts. Because this town needs people we can trust. And because you've proven you'll do the right thing even when it's hard," Frank Morrison added. I looked around the table at these men I'd known for years, feeling something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Respect earned rather than assumed. "I appreciate the offer, but I need time to think about it." "Take all the time you need," Harold said. "Job's yours when you want it." As they returned to their table, Marty raised his beer. "To honest work and honest men." "I'll drink to that." We were finishing our second round when the front door opened and Rita walked in. She looked around the bar, her gaze settling on me with obvious hostility. "Great," Marty muttered. "Here comes trouble." Rita walked over, her face flushed with anger or alcohol or both. "I want to talk to you." "Then talk." "Not here. Outside. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here." "Fine." She raised her voice so the entire bar could hear. "My sister is sitting in a jail cell because of you. An innocent woman who made some mistakes is being treated like a criminal because you couldn't handle being rejected." The bar fell quiet. Every conversation stopped, every head turned toward us. "Your sister is a criminal, Rita. She stole money and destroyed lives. She fell in love with someone else. That's not a crime. Insurance fraud is a crime. Identity theft is a crime. Perjury is a crime. Dana committed all of them. You don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and showed her the court records I'd downloaded. "Michael Torres, Burlington, Vermont, your sister's first husband, currently serving 7 years for fraud she helped commit." Rita stared at the screen, her face going pale. "That's impossible." "Call the Burlington courthouse if you don't believe me. Ask about Dana Torres, née Mitchell. She never mentioned a lot of things, like the fact that she's done this before, like the fact that she was planning to do it again." Rita sank into a chair, the fight going out of her. "I don't understand." "Your sister is a predator, Rita. She finds men who trust her, manipulates them into helping her steal money, then destroys them when she's done. I'm victim number 2. There will probably be others if she's not stopped. But she's my sister. And she's my wife. That doesn't change what she is. Rita started crying then, not the angry tears of accusation, but the broken sobs of someone whose world had just collapsed. Around us, the bar remained silent, everyone watching a family drama play out in public. "I need to go," Rita whispered. She stood up and walked toward the door, moving like someone in shock. At the threshold, she turned back. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I'm sorry for what she did to you." Then she was gone, leaving me alone with a bar full of witnesses to the final collapse of Dana's support system. "Buy you another beer?" Pete asked. "Make it a double." As Pete poured, Harold Vance walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. "That was well done, Colin. Firm but not cruel." "I don't feel good about it. You shouldn't, but sometimes the right thing feels terrible." I nodded, staring into my beer. Around me, conversations gradually resumed, but I could feel the weight of sympathy and respect from people who understood that justice wasn't always satisfying. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You destroyed my life, and I'm going to destroy yours. Dana." I showed the message to Marty, who frowned. "She's not supposed to have phone access." "Probably smuggled in, or using someone else's phone. You should report this to the police." "I will, but first I'm going to finish my beer." I deleted the message and put the phone away. Dana could threaten me all she wanted from her jail cell. She'd already done her worst, and I'd survived it, more than survived it. I'd exposed her, stopped her, and prevented her from destroying other lives. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something approaching peace. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in November. I sat in the gallery behind the prosecutor's table, watching Dana enter the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit that made her look smaller and older than I remembered. She glanced back once, our eyes meeting for a brief moment before she looked away. The prosecution's case was devastating. They had the recordings, the financial records, the text messages, and testimony from Michael Torres via video link from his prison cell. Dana's lawyer, a different one now since she couldn't afford the expensive attorney from Portland, tried to argue emotional distress and manipulation, but the evidence was overwhelming. Trent had already pled guilty and received a reduced sentence in exchange for his testimony against Dana. He looked nervous on the witness stand, repeatedly glancing at Dana as he described how she'd initiated the fraud scheme and taught him to manipulate claims. "She told me she'd done this before," he testified. "Said she knew how to avoid getting caught because she'd learned from previous mistakes." Dana's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The jury had heard that this wasn't Dana's first crime, and their expressions showed they understood the implications. On the third day, the prosecution called me as a witness. I walked to the stand, feeling the weight of every eye in the courtroom, including Dana's. The prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 40s named Sarah Chen, led me through the timeline of my discovery. The hotel receipt, the voice recorder, the confrontation at Dana's office. I answered each question clearly and directly, sticking to facts rather than emotions. "Mr. Harrow," Chen said, "in your opinion, was your wife coerced into committing these crimes?" "Objection," Dana's lawyer called out. "Calls for speculation." "I'll rephrase. Mr. Harrow, based on your 12 years of marriage to the defendant, would you describe her as easily manipulated or coerced?" I looked at Dana, remembering 12 years of careful manipulation, strategic tears, and calculated emotional appeals. No, Dana was the most strong-willed person I've ever known. She made her own decisions. No further questions. Dana's lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive husband seeking revenge, but I'd expected that strategy. I answered his questions calmly, acknowledging my anger and hurt, while maintaining that my primary motivation was stopping Dana from victimizing others. "You recorded your wife's private conversations without her knowledge," the defense attorney said. "Isn't that a violation of trust?" Yes, it was. But discovering that your spouse is committing felonies is also a violation of trust. You could have confronted her privately, given her a chance to explain. She'd been lying to me for months. Why would I expect her to suddenly start telling the truth? The defense attorney moved on, but I could see from the jury's faces that my answers had resonated. Dana took the stand on the fourth day, and I watched her perform one last time. She cried at appropriate moments, claimed victimization, and painted herself as a woman trapped by circumstances beyond her control. But the prosecutor's cross-examination was brutal. Ms. Harrow, you testified that Mr. Wallace forced you to participate in insurance fraud. Is that correct? Yes. Yet we have text messages from you saying, and I quote, "I've been doing this longer than you." How do you explain that? I was trying to impress him. I wanted him to think I was confident. You were trying to impress him by claiming to be an experienced criminal? Dana's composure cracked. That's not what I meant. What about your previous marriage to Michael Torres? Was he also forcing you to commit fraud? That was different. Different how? You helped him steal money, then testified against him to reduce your own sentence. Isn't that exactly what you're trying to do now with Mr. Wallace? No, You've made a career out of manipulating men into helping you commit crimes, then destroying them when you get caught. Isn't that true? Objection. Sustained. But again, the damage was done. The jury had heard the pattern laid out clearly, and Dana's denials sounded hollow. The closing arguments were predictable. The defense painted Dana as a victim of manipulative men and unfortunate circumstances. The prosecution painted her as a serial predator who used marriage as a cover for criminal activity. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, Dana was standing between her lawyer and a bailiff, her hands clenched at her sides. I could see her shoulders shaking slightly. On the charge of insurance fraud in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of identity theft, how do you find? Guilty. The guilty verdicts continued for all 12 charges. Dana's legs gave out, and she would have fallen if the bailiff hadn't caught her arm. Sentencing was scheduled for the following month, but the prosecutor told me afterward that Dana was looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. She'll probably serve 12 with good behavior, Sarah Chen said as we left the courthouse. But she'll be in her 50s when she gets out, and she'll have a federal record that makes it hard to find victims. What about restitution? The court will order her to pay back what she stole, but realistically, you'll probably recover about 30 cents on the dollar. She spent most of the money. I nodded. I'd expected that. The money had never been the point anyway. That evening, I drove to the Iron Tap for what had become a ritual. Marty was waiting at his usual spot, along with Harold, Tom, and Frank. They'd been following the trial in the local paper, and they wanted to hear about the verdict firsthand. Guilty on all counts, I announced as I sat down. The cheer that went up from our table spread throughout the bar. People I barely knew raised their glasses and offered congratulations. For a moment, I felt like I was celebrating with the entire town. How do you feel? Marty asked. I thought about it. Tired, relieved, empty. Empty? 12 years of my life were based on lies. That's hard to get over even when justice is served. Harold leaned forward. You know what's not based on lies? That job offer. Chief building inspector, 20% raise, respect of the entire town. What do you say? I looked around the table at these men who'd supported me through the worst experience of my life. Men who valued honesty, hard work, and doing the right thing, even when it was difficult. I say yes. Another cheer went up, and Pete appeared with a bottle of champagne that had probably been sitting behind the bar for years, waiting for an occasion worthy of opening it. To Colin Harrow, Harold announced, raising his glass. Chief building inspector and the man who cleaned up our town. To justice, I replied. We drank until closing time, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy. Not vindicated or relieved, but actually happy about the future. The next morning brought a phone call from Detective Morrison. Thought you'd want to know, we got a call from the FBI. They're opening an investigation into insurance fraud in 3 other states. Apparently, Dana's pattern goes back further than we thought. How much further? They think she's been doing this for 15 years, maybe longer. You and Michael Torres weren't her first victims. You were just the first ones to fight back. I hung up feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that Dana would face consequences for all her crimes, sadness for the men whose lives she'd destroyed before I stopped her. That afternoon, I cleaned out Dana's belongings from our house, my house now. Clothes, jewelry, personal items that represented 12 years of shared life. Most of it went to charity, but I kept one thing, our wedding photo. Not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder. A reminder that trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. A reminder that some people are capable of extraordinary deception. A reminder to never again ignore the warning signs when someone's foundation starts to crack. I hung the photo in my workshop, next to my building inspector's license and the commendation I'd received from the town council. A reminder of lessons learned and prices paid. 3 weeks later, Dana was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. I didn't attend the sentencing, but I read about it in the paper. She'd made one final plea for mercy, claiming she was a changed woman who'd learned from her mistakes. The judge wasn't impressed. "Ms. Harrow," he said according to the newspaper account, "you've spent your adult life manipulating and destroying good people for personal gain. The court sees no evidence that you've changed, and frankly, society will be safer with you behind bars." 18 years. Dana would be 55 when she got out, assuming she served the full sentence. I felt nothing when I read about the sentencing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no closure. Just the quiet knowledge that justice had been served and other potential victims had been protected. That evening, I sat in my kitchen, truly my kitchen now, and made a list of projects for the house. New paint for the bedroom, updated fixtures in the bathroom, maybe a deck out back where I could sit and watch the seasons change. For the first time in years, I was planning a future instead of just surviving the present. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Saw the news about the sentencing. Thank you for stopping her. Michael Torres. I typed back, "Thank you for warning me about what to expect. Good luck." "You too. You deserve better than what she gave you." "We both do." I put the phone away and opened a beer, sitting at the kitchen table where this whole nightmare had started with a hotel receipt. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, the first of the season. By morning, Millbrook would be covered in white, clean and fresh, and ready for whatever came next. Just like me.